Hello and welcome to Talk Solent, where today we're looking at what happens after a success and after a disaster. One of my guests today has windsurfed his way across the channel twice in a 12-day period, and he survived very high winds. Very happy and very proud to do so. My other guest, meanwhile, is just thanking her lucky stars that she survived at all, because she was a victim of the Clapham Junction Rail Disaster of 1988, and she's here to tell us how she's picked up her life since then. The windsurfer extraordinaire that I've got here is Ptol Slattery, who's probably better known for his appearances as something of a gourmet chef on that nationwide favourite Come Dine With Me. And also on the sofa is Marilyn Robinson, who found herself on the wrong train at the wrong time, but was one of the lucky ones. Welcome to you both. Thank you very much for joining me. Marilyn, let's go back to that day, because this is the raison d'etre for being here today. This was 10 past 8 on the morning of December the 12th, 1988. 35 people died in this crash, and an astonishing 500 people were injured, and you were among them. Whereabouts were you on one of the trains when all this happened?
I actually have no idea. I know I was towards the back, but I couldn't actually give you that detail. Not at all.
Well, what was the first you were aware that something was wrong?
As other people have described, it was odd. There was a sort of influx of sound of nothing. Initially, there was sort of things going on in the carriage, and suddenly it was almost as though everybody had taken a breath in, and air had disappeared, and within a fraction of a second, terrific of 3 bangs, which were really loud, and each time a bang happened, the carriages were being knocked together. Yeah, absolutely.
Did you think at the time, oh my God, we're having an accident?
No.
What did you think was happening?
I don't think I had a recollection of what was happening per se, but I was watching other people around me and seeing what was happening to them. There was luggage coming out of the racks, there were people being thrown everywhere. And I had already clocked the guy opposite me who was wearing a white shirt, and I thought he looked very pale. Perhaps should be wearing a different colour shirt, but he was even whiter. So if that's possible, he did. So really, no. And then having thought about it a few seconds later, I don't know how long, hence, yes, I thought this is what it must be like to be in a train crash.
As indeed it was. One train had stopped at a signal, and another crashed into the back of it, and a third, which was coming the other way, crashed into the debris of the first 2. So you were not aware that there were 3 trains involved in that? You were involved?
Yes.
You were aware?
Well, there obviously had to be something that hit us, and it would only be a train because nothing else would be on the lines of that nature. And yes, I saw the train come the other way.
What could you see around you after this happened? What was going on in the carriage?
Well, everybody was tidying it up, because I imagine, like I did, they all felt they were going to continue their journey. And that would be really...
Oh, they weren't trapped, they weren't lying on the floor, they were...
Some were falling about, a couple were bleeding, but unless you've been in something like that, it's very difficult for you to understand, but it's so shocking. I remember a feeling of like a Hiroshima implosion of shock. And yeah, people were tidying up the carriage because, yeah, we must be going on. The carriage was still whole, but it was leaning to one side. It couldn't have gone anywhere because I don't think it was on the rails properly anyway.
So there was no sense of the enormity of what had just happened?
No.
You weren't aware of what was going to transpire later?
No. And the other thing is that, generally speaking, having something so shocking, the natural reaction is to actually not only protect yourself, but to protect other people from around you. So the likelihood of you being able to expound upon the theories of at that moment is practically 0.
How long were you in this situation before something happened?
Well, I've no idea, actually. It must have been over half an hour, but I know that the chap next to me decided he was going to go out of the door before the 3rd train came, and I grabbed hold of him and dragged him back and told him to sit down, and I was a nurse. Well, in that split second, I decided that if I was a lecturer, he wouldn't sit down. But if I said I was a nurse, he thought he would, and he did.
So you were thinking quite quickly.
I wasn't aware that I was, but obviously I must have been, because that's what happened. But he was trying to tidy up because he picked up a newspaper. Well, the guy opposite, picked up a newspaper, and the guy next to me said, "That's my newspaper." And the guy was reading it upside down because he was so shocked. I mean, the shock is so huge, but you're not aware of it at the time.
Was there any conversation between you and other passengers?
No, I don't recall anybody saying anything.
No,
Nothing. No, actually, I've never been asked that before, but no conversation at all.
It was just a kind of surreal silence.
Utter silence. Except that you were aware then, I wondered why men were walking past without their jackets. And my brain it was all so shocking that you didn't actually really want to answer that question, but you knew that people needed to be covered or...
Yeah, it must have dawned on you after a few minutes, I guess.
No, because it was too shocking to think about it. It's too big a thing to think about.
You were refusing to accept.
The brain naturally deals with what's there rather than the whole
you can't
thing.
Use the process of logic on it.
That's right.
I see that. So you weren't feeling that perhaps rescue was on its way because you didn't realise you were in a situation that you needed rescuing from?
No, I don't think I ever thought about rescue, just wondering what was going to happen. And I remember thinking, somebody will come along and tell us, but that wasn't necessarily going to happen. But eventually somebody did. But we couldn't get out of the carriage we were in. We had to go through all the other carriages that were there.
What did they say to you? Do you remember?
I don't know. It could have been something like follow me, because we all decided to follow him anyway.
You got out. You weren't trapped in your carriage then. You were able to.
No.
And where did he take you? Where did he lead you?
Well, I've no idea where we ended up, other than the fact that being in an old slam door train, the door was open, and if you've ever tried to jump out of a carriage not in the station, you'll realise that there's a big space down which you have to go.
Yeah.
So I remember turning round and thinking, there's a handle here, I'll hold on to that and I'll jump backwards. And the sensation was like landing on a cloud. You know, you go in an aeroplane and you think, oh, I'd love to go and play on those clouds. And actually, that's what it felt like, if I could possibly put a feeling on it, you know.
Yeah, I understand, yes. So you jumped out backwards?
Yes.
I know you've had some spine damage, haven't you?
But I had no idea. Because
was it because you jumped out backwards?
No. It was, because you're so numb with the shock, you don't feel anything.
What injuries did you sustain, if you don't mind me asking?
I damaged my spine and my neck, which is obviously the other end of the spine, and my arm, and post-traumatic stress.
Tell me about that, because that's something we hear a lot about. But,
yes.
But I mean, you're a very confident, outgoing person, but suddenly there you are, this has happened to you, you're entitled to have post-traumatic stress. What did that mean for you? Nothing,
because nobody really knew about it in those days. And the work that I've done since with it and meeting other people, even saying to the doctor you were shocked was meaningless, because they had no experience. These days they do, and it's treated incredibly differently. Well, I had actually no idea that I was going to have that until the next day, when I went to the doctor's surgery, because somebody phoned me and said I ought to report that I'd been in the train crash.
I think we may have missed a step here. So you were able to go home, were you, after the crash?
No, I didn't. No, I walked into the station to meet thousands of commuters that had gone nowhere, absolutely with their shocked faces, which is very damaging as well. But they weren't to know that, and I wasn't to know that. We'd already seen a train go past with faces that were to damage me and other people, maybe, although I've never been able to talk to anybody else about that. And then I got on a train and went out to, I don't know what station.
You got on another train? Yeah.
I had to get to Kingston Business School, where I was on a course.
I wondered whether you might have never wanted to set foot on a train again.
I was too shocked to even think about that. And I managed to borrow a phone, because in those days there weren't all the mobiles, and just said to someone, I'm alive, and they said, oh, that's good. And that's it. And the reason I did that is because I was protecting them, because it's so bad.
So when you got home, did you think, I'm very lucky, or I'm just normal, or...?
No.
What was it like in those early hours and days after?
Well, I went to the business school, and a chap walked towards me. He was on the course, and he was a policeman, and he said, you don't look too good. I said, no, I want a coffee with 11 sugars in it. Well, I wouldn't have had either, but I knew I had to treat myself for shock, so I was trying to treat myself. And then he said, oh, the one where the people died, it was the train crash you're talking about. And I said, yes, but I didn't realise, no, I realised people had died, but I hadn't accepted it. And the minute I did, I just fell to the ground. I couldn't stand. So the shock had protected me up to that moment.
Simply delayed shock.
Yeah. But then in the afternoon, somebody's husband, who had flu, He managed to get up and drive me home, and I insisted on picking up my car and driving it back to the house.
So in the days and months and after the crash, was it difficult to get life back together? What was the kind of effect on your family and your life in general?
Well, I went back to the college. I don't think I had a day off actually, because, you know, you went to work. You didn't have days off unnecessarily. But the noise of the students, they may have been shouting with joy, but that brought back the train crash. And really, after that, I realised I couldn't carry on working. But what I should have done is have a year off and been looked after.
You shouldn't have been at work at all.
But in
really,
those days, they didn't do that.
Yes, because we are talking 28 years ago.
Yes.
Which is
those days, you just picked yourself up, and I could hear my father, upbringing, well, you know, okay, you knocked yourself out, get up and carry on, which is what I was doing. So I then did leave. I handed in my notice and got another job, because I wanted a company car, and it was a completely different job, which I was doing, and I did that right round to the July, and eventually in the July, I froze completely. I got into work and couldn't move a muscle.
It's now 28 years since the crash. These days you do Pilates and yoga and meditation. Do you think the accident has made you a more reflective person? Do you think differently about life?
That's interesting. I don't know. I think older age has. I just carried on and did what I could do. And if I found I couldn't do something and the doctor said rest, I did the exact opposite, because I soon realised that with injuries like that I had, if you did nothing, it got worse. So I just need to get off my backside and do something. So I did. It was much more painful doing that, and I'd wake up in the night screaming in agony because I'd done an aerobics class. But eventually, the good side of it overtook the bad side of it, and I haven't stopped since then. But I think as you get older, you watch people wasting their life, and you think, little do you know, this could be your last day.
Yeah, at least you can talk about it now.
Oh, well, I've always been able to talk about it, because not because I didn't want to, but to do that, but because of other people.
Yeah.
If you don't talk about it, then other people can't possibly begin to understand. And
sorry, I'm afraid we have to stop at that point, because we have to stop talking because we've got a break coming up.
Right.
We'll be back afterwards. We'll meet our other guest as well.
Yes, look forward to it.
See you in a moment.